Y. Okay, we okay with this? Oh, hemophilia, by the way, is another example of this. So, again, it's going to be an X-linked X-linked disease, so it's going to follow the same pattern of inheritance as color blindness would. Okay, so an example of
Baldness too, right?
baldness, male pattern baldness. I don't know.
That's fair, fun.
Oh, that's right, it is. Yeah, it is X-linked inherited. I don't know if it's, I guess it's one gene. Actually, I think it is, yeah. I think you're right.
Doesn't that occur in females too?
Baldness is a polygenic.
Oh, polygenic. Okay, so it takes multiple genes in order to influence. All right. Well, okay. Yeah, a few slides ahead. All right, in this example, this is looking at hemophilia, and again, this is going to be another X-linked inherited disease. So in this case, we have the father. He's normal. He's got a big H. And then we have a mother who's a carrier, but she's normal, so she's a heterozygous. And so when these gametes meet, that female is going to be totally normal. When these gametes meet, that son is going to be totally normal. And whenever you have these two meet, you're going to have a heterozygote, which will also be a carrier, but will be normal. And then the only way that you can get this hemophilia is if you inherit the mutated form of the disease from your mother. And then if you have that X, then you're automatically going to end up with hemophilia, simply because you get what's on the X chromosome, whether you not like it or not, if you're the male, since they're only receiving one. So it's just like a recessively inherited disease, except it happens to be on the sex chromosomes, which means it's not going to be on both pairs if you're a male, because you have two different sex chromosomes. Females, we have two of the same. So if one of them isn't perfect, we have another one to back us up, or allow us to be a carrier without being affected. Okay, so because females have two X chromosomes, that means that they're going to have twice as many of those genes that are found on the X chromosome, right? So one X chromosome, I don't know how many genes it has, let's just say it has 30. And then if you have another X chromosome, that means you're going to have 30 duplicate copies of genes. Whereas in males, they can get away with having one X chromosome. So in other words, you really only need one X to live and function normally. So females, instead of having this kind of double dosage of genes or double dosage of proteins, a whole extra set of proteins on the X chromosome, what's going to happen in females is one of those X chromosomes is going to kind of just inactivate itself. It's just going to kind of shut down. Because we don't need to have twice as many of the proteins that are going to be there. In fact, when you have too many of something in your cell, it can be really, really bad. So if you have too many copies of a gene or too many copies of a protein, bad stuff can happen, just like if you don't have enough. So there's a medium range of where you want your levels of proteins and gene expression to be. So in females, if you did not inactivate this X chromosome, you would have twice as many genes being turned on and twice as many proteins being turned on. Whereas in males, they only have one X, so only those genes on that one X are being expressed. So in order to balance the dosage, even with the males, and not to get too much of all the stuff on the X chromosome, females shut down one. And this is called X chromosome inactivation. And when these X chromosomes inactivate, they literally just kind of like shrivel up and they become what's called a bar body. And so this, if you look in a cell after this X chromosome inactivation occurs, so if this is my X, meaning my X chromosome, you'll see another little one. It just looks like a little curled up ball. So it's called a bar body, labeled for the guy who discovered it. But anyways, this X chromosome inactivation is going to be totally random. All right, so one time it'll be this X chromosome, and the next time it'll be this other X chromosome. So there's no method to the madness. It's just totally random. And so this is also going to contribute to various different types of phenotypes. Like calico cats, for instance. You know, most cats, they're a solid color. They're orange or black or gray or something like that. But these calico cats, they have different patches and different color fur. And the reason why that is because each cell in the body, she's a female, so each cell had to inactivate an X chromosome. And every time that happens, it's totally random. So in this case, she's heterozygous. She's got an allele for black fur and an allele for orange fur. So in the regions where there's orange fur, all right, the chromosome with the black allele was inactivated. Whereas in patches of the black area, the chromosome that had the orange allele is the one that's shut down. And so you end up with these patchy little regions of hair based on which X chromosome was inactivated. But that means that calico cats and tortoiseshell cats like this one, they can only be females, right? Because in males, you can't shut down the X chromosome because you only have one of them. So calico cats and animals of this nature that have these different patchy furs, that's because of this chromosome, or this X chromosome inactivation. Is that?
It's very rare for a male. They said it's an XXY.
Yeah, usually you have to have a different kind of anomaly of genotype. Yeah, they'd have to have XXY in order to do that, but that's pretty rare in itself. So.
And they're sterile.
Yeah.
I have a fascination with calicos. I love them.
I had What is a calico cat technically? Is it like a cat that is black and orange and like white, or is it just like any cat that has like different patches of color fur? I got a white
They're the
cat
tricolor, black, orange,
with
and white.
like black and gray like striped
Yeah.
spots on him.
I think a calico is specifically the orange and the black and the white.
Halloween cats.
Yeah, Halloween cats, yeah. And then the other cats, I'm sure it's some sort of similar mechanism. But I know in calicos, it's literally, they have to have two different, you know, if they both had black alleles, then it wouldn't matter which one shut down, the cat would still be black, right? But so for calicos, you have to have the orange allele and the black allele. And to be honest, I don't know where the white allele comes from. There's probably another white allele that's...
Well, it's a lack of color.
It's a lack of color. Okay, there you go.
That's what white cats are, lack of color.
Lack of
They're not
color.
actually a color, they're lack of.
Okay.
So are you saying it's not common for the male cats to be striped and stuff?
No, not striped. It's not common for male cats to be
Like that?
like the orange, the black, and the white patchy. This is a calico cat. Specifically, this is a calico cat, just like this is a tortoiseshell cat. You can see his face is split. Got some Braveheart action going on. All right, other questions? All right.
Is there a certain time that it's going to do that? Except
It happens during development. Other than that, I don't have a specific time for it.
you
But
know that one chromosome stops?
one chromosome crumbles up and you lose all the genetic information. All right, so we talked about autosomal recessive diseases. Well, there's also autosomal dominant diseases. So it's still going to be on one of the autosomes, chromosomes 1 through 22, but instead of being inherited in a recessive manner, which is pretty much what we've just talked about up to this point, it's going to be inherited in a dominant pattern. And so think of the dominant pattern. So one example of a dominantly inherited disease is going to be dwarfism. So anyone who is a dwarf is going to have a certain genotype. And that genotype is going to be either heterozygous or homozygous dominant. So that means that the normal individual is going to be the homozygous recessive, because this trait that's getting inherited, this capital D, the mutated form is dominant over the normal form. So in other words, people who are dwarves only have to have one copy of this bad gene, and they're automatically going to be dwarfs. Unlike in a homozygous recessive, In a recessive inheritance pattern, you need 2 copies of the recessive allele, right? Well, in the case of dominance, you need 2 copies of the recessive allele in order to be normal. So if you have a Punnett square, let's just say we have a normal female and a dwarf dad. So this person, they're going to be a dwarf because all they need is that one dominant allele to
I'm
be
staying
inherited.
straight from a dwarf, and she has a normal daughter, like, she's a
Yeah, no, it's
normal
totally normal. And so, like this, if you have a dwarf, and then this one's going to be heterozygous, so that one will be a dwarf. But these two, they'll be normal. You could even have a heterozygous, so if we change this to a big D, then that means, you know, this one has at least a 25% chance of being normal. So yeah, you can have 2 dwarfs and have children and then be totally normal. But we consider this a dominantly inherited disease because the affected gene, the mutated gene that's causing this, is going to be dominant over the normal gene. So it's just the opposite of recessive. So in this case, the disease is dominant, meaning the disease is more prevalent over normal. And so another characteristic of these dominantly inherited diseases are when you look at these pedigrees, like so, you will see the trait or the disease appear in every single generation. Unlike a recessive disease, it might skip a generation or something because recessive diseases are less rare. Excuse me. And so we can compare these autosomal recessive and these autosomal dominant inheritance patterns by looking at these pedigrees. And so all of these pedigrees are normally going to be the same. So a square represents a male and a circle represents a female. And if that person is affected with a certain trait, then it's going to be colored in. And if they're normal, then it's going to be just white, clear. So this is showing that a normal female married a dwarf male. They had children. These are all their children.
Well, not 2.
Sorry, so this one I should say, this one, and this one. Yeah, so 1, 3, 5, and 7 are their children.
And 6.
And 6. Good Lord. All right. 5, 6, and 7. All right. So whenever they do this, I mean, and of course it's depending on their genotype, but because it's a dominantly inherited disorder, and this affected male, like I said, you only need 1 copy of the big D to become a dwarf. So you're going to see that every single generation, so this is, you know, the first set of kids, and then these would be the grandkids, and then if we had another one, those would be the great-grandkids. So for every single generation, you're going to see at least some of the offspring be affected by a dominantly inherited disease.
So even farther down the line, everyone's gonna have.
Everyone's going to
6,
have
7,
it,
8
yeah, it's not going to disappear.
The dwarf somewhere.
Yeah, whereas in a recessively inherited disease like albinoism, like we talked about the other day, you need to have, in order to be affected, you need to have 2 copies of the little a. You need to be homozygous recessive because it's a recessively inherited disease. Whereas in a dominantly inherited disease, you need 1 copy of the dominant trait. It's just that the disease state is more dominant over the normal state. And so you can see that in this pedigree right here, you have carriers, but they aren't affected, and not every generation is affected. So it'll kind of come in and come out of various different generations.
Carriers of dwarfism were affected because you only need 1 day.
What was that?
I thought carriers of dwarfism.
They are. Carriers are affected because you only need the 1 copy of the big D.
You're talking about albinos.
I'm talking about albinos. So the only way that an albino is going to be an albino if they are little a, so homozygous recessive. Because it's a recessively inherited disease. Basically, in a recessively inherited disease, you need 2 copies of that gene. And because it's recessive, we signify it with a lowercase. Now, in a dominantly inherited disease, you're still talking about inheriting a disease. It just so happens that for some reason, natural selection favored the dwarf over the normal allele. So anytime you get that capital D or that dominant trait, you're going to get the disease associated with it. Does that kind of make sense? It's a little confusing because in recessively inherited diseases, you know, little a is going to give you the disease. But in dominantly inherited, you know, little d is going to make you normal as far as dwarfism is concerned. So you can think of it that way if that makes it a little bit easier to understand.
Little these make big people. Go.
All right. Oh, and finally, the last one, this is the type of X-linked inheritance pattern that you might observe. And so this one is actually for color blindness. And so, again, this gene is going to occur on the X chromosome, which means it's going to affect males more than females. And so you can actually see that in this pedigree. The only people that are affected are going to be males. Now, the females, they'll be carriers, but they're going to have normal vision. And so it's not necessarily going to appear or disappear in every single generation, but you're going to notice that only the males are the ones that are being affected. I shouldn't say only no matter what, but most of the time it's the males that are being affected. So we can use these pedigrees and these patterns of inheritance in order to determine how a gene is going to behave, how it's going to be inherited from one generation to the next generation.
And just with that one, the third one, X-linked, that's going to be more for the males. What happens to the males? Or are you talking about all of them?
No, just for the X-linked. So X-linked inheritance patterns, if you look at the pedigree, all right, you'll see that only the males are affected. Now, in a recessive pattern, you'll see that it comes and goes in different generations. But in the dominant one, you'll see the disease in every single generation. So I could, hypothetically, pick a pedigree, put it on the test and say, what type of inheritance pattern is this? So you should be able to recognize the type of inheritance based on who's affected and who's not affected. So, just to do a quick example, and I might regret this, but all right, let's look. You know what? I'm not even going to go there. It's going to take too much time. I'm not even going to go there. Never mind. We're going to move forward. We'll review for the test. It'll be, yeah, we're good. Moving forward. Okay. So another type of inheritance pattern is called polygenic inheritance. And polygenic means many genes. Poly means many, genic means genes. So in other words, you have many genes contributing to one phenotype. And so height is one of those. It's not like there's a tall gene and a short gene and a medium height gene, or there's a 5'1" gene and a 5'10" gene, you know, or a 6'2" gene. It's just multiple different genes are having an effect on your height. And so in these polygenic inherited patterns, you see lots of variation, right? There's kind of the extreme, so in this case the really, really tall people and the really, really short people, but most people are going to kind of fall in the middle. Same thing with skin color, which we brought up yesterday. So skin color is determined by 6 different pigment genes. And those genes, either you have pigment or you don't have pigment. It's one or the other. And so depending on how many of these pigment genes are turned on, that determines your skin tone. So people who are really, 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 really pale, they're not going to have these pigment genes on. Whereas people who are really, 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 really dark, all 6 of these genes are going to code for dark pigment. So if these people got together and had kids, right, it'd be half and half. So they'd be immediately somewhere in the middle. And so this is an additive effect. So it doesn't matter if this one's colored. So that individual and this individual are the exact same color. It doesn't matter which gene was pigmented and which not. If you have 3 pigment genes and 3 non-pigment genes, then you're gonna be somewhere in the middle.
This might be silly. When does it happen when, like, it might be like one, it might be half? Is it just gonna be, you're gonna get a probability of?
It's just a
some-
dosage amount,
Okay,
that's
I didn't
all
mean
it
like
is.
Mix or anything like that?
What do you mean a mix?
Like white and black.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like half of that, half of a circle will be shaded out in the example.
No, because the gene, it's either on or it's off.
Okay.
If it's on, if all 6 of them are on, you're gonna be really, really, really dark. If all 6 of them are off, you're gonna be really, really, really white.
But what about the 2 dark people that have a really, really, really light baby?
That
That's another baby daddy.
is a good indication that that's another baby daddy. I'm not gonna say it's not possible, but because it's multiple genes, there's other, it's more, this is a very
Is
simplistic
Daddy
way.
gonna have a dark baby if he?
I have no idea.
Well, my mom is like not red. She's like a little bit lighter than you, and I'm darker than my dad.
Huh.
I don't know my daddy. I look just like my dad. Exactly. Like. Well, he said it's probably because my grandpa was really dark.
Yeah, and some of these, like I said, it's more than one gene, so you definitely inherit a percentage of genes from your grandparents and your aunts and your uncles. There's a known percentage, like you are 1/16 of your grandparents' DNA. Yeah.
So like, on the growing gene, you said that takes a lot of different things as well. It's like, I know there's one gene that runs in my family that stops our family from growing and then starts us growing at an older age again. Like, on my dad's side of the family, everybody stopped growing in high school, and then after they graduated college, grew like
Shot
3
up.
inches. Like, my uncle went to World War II and came back and grew like 3 inches. And
Oh,
he was
wow.
in his 40s.
Wow. I have never heard of anything like that. That's cool.